like I say, realistic shape, thoughts on that, and every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. True hope begins when illusions end. A teacher by nature and contrarian by design. And of course, an author too, none other than Miss Michelle Stiles.
It's nice to be here, Daniel. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Miss Michelle. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
No, you didn't miss much. I'm one of these small voices, independent thinkers that was exploring my world, like many people, and so I saw some things that did not fit into my box of how the world should work, and so when you encounter that, you're asking more questions and you seek answers, and so I did, and I started to study the term propaganda. And what I did is I came across George Creel's book, How We Advertised America. And he was the head of the Committee on Public Information in World War One. And he had this book, the whole title, again, is sort of like in your face, how we advertised America during the World War One. So basically, how we sold the war. And I thought, gosh, I don't know about you, but we should either have good reasons for going to war or not, but we shouldn't be selling it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so when I read that, I said, I started asking people around me, I said, was I sleeping in social studies class? Is it me, or did you learn this as well? And really, nobody knew it. And I'm like, why don't we know this history? I mean, this is so important because we have this impossible political situation now where people feel like they can't talk to each other, right? Both sides, it's like a hopeless situation almost. And, um, I just sought answers for that basically. So that's kind of how I got here. I'm about to release book two, and those books are basically a reflection of my inquiry into this topic.
Mm-hmm. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Miss Michelle. Thank you. And today we will talk about why the infrastructure of belief makes man extremely vulnerable in technology society. Right? So, if we define the infrastructure of belief as the system that shapes that we accept true, what is the specific flaw in the old architecture that modern technologies exploits most efficiently?
Right. Well, I guess let's just go to myth number one in propaganda. And again, that's a really bad term, but um, myth number one is that facts and reason can defend us from it. So if I'm just a little more logical, or if I just get the correct facts, right? Because we think of propaganda as being lies, mistruths, disinformation, right? Or emotionalism, both of those. And if we could just somehow be logical and rational, eliminate reason, and find the right facts, we can make the right decisions. And that's the basic assumption, but it's a really bad assumption, because what happens is in a complex world, we're actually using trust more than facts and reason. Okay. And so that's what the infrastructure of beliefs is. It's an architecture of shortcuts that we use to kind of fast track our understanding in the world. And we can go into that a little bit more if you want, Daniel.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Miss Michelle. Go ahead.
Okay, so when I read Gustave Le Bon, he wrote in basically late 1800s a book called The Crowd: A Study of the Popular Mind. Are you getting an echo, Daniel?
Hmm. Okay, I will
I'm
fix
getting an
it for
echo.
you.
Yeah, I'm getting my own voice kind of echoing back. Okay, that's much better, much better. Okay. Um, so where was I? Was talking about, okay, so this book in the late 1800s, and you read it and you go, wow, it's so applicable today. And so I just kind of reverse engineered that book. I said, well, if this stuff has been working, and obviously we're using it now, 100 and some years later, he must be saying something's true, that he must be saying something that's true about human nature. And so, in a small local environment, let's just take the 1800s, for example. When you lived in a rural community, most things were very close to you, and it was a material world, right? So I could rely on my own experience. I could rely on trusted others, authorities, and I could rely on, what most people were doing as a safeguard. And in that environment, your world is very conservative. It doesn't change much. People who come in with different ideas are kind of pushed to the outside. And we see this in indigenous peoples, right, that don't have any limited contact with the outside world. Their system stays really stable sometimes for centuries, right? And we also see this in the Amish. The Amish are living essentially the similar lifestyle from the 19 or 1800s, and we're already into the 21st century. And how did that happen? Well, they retained the structures of their local culture. So they had, if you look at a number 5 dice, okay, in the middle, think about experience. And this is trust your eyes. Seeing is believing. We really do trust our eyes. And um, the of course, a doubting Thomas story. Everybody knows that from the Bible. He said, I'm going to only believe if I see this. In judicial practice, we discount hearsay, but we elevate the eyewitness, right? If you saw something, it was real. And this is an area that is like, it's like, how do we get manipulated in a technological society? So we'll see something. If we see it on TV, it's like I was there and experienced it, but I didn't. And the problem is that many things visually can be manipulated. Just for example, if you're looking for a weight loss program and you see those before and after pictures, right? Okay, well, you're going to go, oh wow, okay, so they dropped 20 pounds or 50 pounds and they look really really great. And so we're being shown, oh, this works. That's what we're being told. And it's as if we experienced it, we were there, we saw the person, of course, but we don't know, right? We don't even know if it's the same people in those two pictures, right? So seeing is believing, and we're vulnerable to that, right? Now the second thing is authorities. In that local community that I talked about, your authorities were people that you knew. It was your church pastor, it was the judge of the town hall or whatever. Might have been an elder, right? It might be grandparents, great grandparents, somebody that you know. And so you could vet them, and you could they gave you wisdom over time, right? And now we have these authorities that are very distant from us, and they're, I mean, again, personally, it's very, very difficult to vet people that way. But in a complex society, we have to rely on these people, right? Example is COVID, right? How many of us are virologists, right? Okay, so we couldn't really know what the arguments are, so we had to look around for trusted voices, and that's what most people did, right? So they'll say, well, my personal experience, I don't know, so I'll look to the experts. Thirdly, if we don't know, we can't make a decision on both of those things, experience or authority. We're going to kind of say, what's everybody else doing? I mean, if people are running for the exits, we're just going to follow them. We're kind of we are a herd type people, and so we don't want to be we don't want to stand out. We don't want to be outside the mainstream of thought, and so in many cases we'll just go along. And all those three things that I've just talked about is used in marketing. It's used to sell. And if you've ever taken a marketing class, of course, I just mentioned the before and after pictures. That's the proof, right? Or it's a scientific research study that's proof. There's something that you can see that's proof. Then they'll bring out as seen on, or as promoted by, right? Celebrities, big names, and then when you go on that website and those little things keep popping up on the side that says, hey, somebody bought this in South Dakota and somebody bought this in Maine. It's basically saying it's social proof. It's like, oh, everybody's doing this, right? Or if you have a lot of social media saying the same thing, it says, yeah, this is what the crowd's doing. It's okay to go along in this way. So that's kind of how technology can hijack those three things very easily. And we think that we're moving along the line of facts, but in many cases it's these three areas that are influencing our shaping our beliefs, much more so than the facts themselves.
Miss Michelle, how has the model of a social media optimized for engagement our truth effectively hijack and weaponize our innate psychological need for belonging and shared belief?
Well, that's I just kind of touched on that a little bit, right? And think again, like it's really good to go back in time and think, okay, so a huge thing that happened, we had these rural communities. We're thinking about America in the mid 1800 late 1800s, right? They don't get if you a newspaper is 6 cents a day. Most people can't afford that. That's upper middle class. And so news from the world does not impact you very much. You're just out there working on a farm and doing whatever you're doing. When they invented the penny press, which was $1 million, investment, pretty much, it was only for the rich and wealthy to promote news, right? Because the average guy couldn't, get a printing press that would do that. So, but that made it available to the common man, news from outside the world. And the other thing that the revolution, industrial revolution, was the railroad. And now I could distribute those newspapers all across the countryside and even across the country. And so now, instead of my local material world, there was being created something called a spiritual public, right? It's something outside us. It's news from the world that's out there. And again, we can't touch it, we can't feel it. And it's impacting and shaping our behavior. And so just keep that there. That was just newspaper and basically book, magazines, maybe pamphlets. Okay, you add to that radio in a few years, right? Then you add to that the television. Then you add to that computers, and then you add to that what you just said is a phone literally in our hand. Maybe 24/7 for some people. So it goes from all the way from having very little outside influence shaping our beliefs and our attitudes to something that, depending on how much we consume of it, can absolutely drive public opinion and manipulate public opinion almost at will. And so it's a difference between, I call that local culture, the walnut, because it's very stable, up to this massive public opinion shaping machine that has been created and added to and expanded, and the skill set expanded to influence, you know, all the politics that we have right now.
All the politics for sure. So the speed versus wisdom gap, Miss Michelle. Belief once form and evolve at the speed of community conversation. Now narrative is spread at digital speed. How
Mm.
does this velocity mismatch itself become a vertical vulnerability?
Yeah. Oh, that's absolutely true, right? So again, the diffusion of ideas in that walnut is very, very slow, right? Like I mentioned, the Amish are almost impervious to it because they don't connect electricity to their homes. Think about that, right? So they don't get that speed or velocity of ideas, and they're very resistant to change because of that. And so you can just see, extrapolate that out. Now you have massive, uh, eh, like almost the stream can be poisoned at will from almost 1,000 different directions. Does that make sense? And like one way, okay, so just take 1996. That was the start of Fox News. Actually, that was the advent of like the cable market. So prior to that, most Americans got their news from one news stream. Now it was tacking left at the time. And so it created a vacuum for people who are not happy with the news. So up comes Fox News, and it siphons off those of a more conservative nature, right? So you have the liberal nature and the conservative nature, both absolutely needed in a society. So for the past 20 some years or more, you have people getting their news from two different sources. So I call it the bifurcation of the public mind. And it's disastrous, right? Because at some point, people like, like just give you an example that the Doge. issue that came up recently, right? If you were on the right, most right leaning uh, broadcasters were saying that that was just a read only. They didn't really have access to the database. So if you're on the other side, it was like, yeah, no, they're siphoning off these government databases and providing them to the corporation. So, depending on which side you are, you're almost getting different facts about the world. Well, that's not going to go well, right? I mean, it's driving a wedge into the society so that left can't talk to the right and the right can't talk to the left about any current events because they literally have different facts about the world.
Different facts of the world, definitely. So, Miss Michelle, the erosion of trusted institutions. Technology often facilitate direct or this, let's say, disintermediated communication. Has this inherently undetermined traditional belief forming institutions like news, academia, or science? And if so, what was the incredibly replace them?
I'm not sure I understand. So, what undermines the institutions that have trust?
Yes. How
Okay,
this credibly replace them?
how do we credibly replace them?
Yes, just like news, academia, or
Okay,
science,
yeah,
which
yeah.
is
Okay, yeah, right. Well, one of the ways that really muddies the water is something called a front group or a third party technique, and this has been around for a long time. And what you're doing is you're taking money that's allocated to convince you of something, right? And but these people that are going to convince you are going to look like an interested party. They're going to look very self-serving, and they don't want to look self-serving. So they're going to take the money and they're going to create this front group or this organization that looks neutral, scientific, impartial, unbiased, and they're going to put their voice through that front group. And so, and you just look around, and so they might have a somebody you recognize at the head of it, somebody that's trustworthy from somewhere else, and so they can drive their opinion that doesn't look interested through those organizations, and we are literally swimming in those. Okay, that should actually be illegal. You should have to declare where your money is coming from, because again, depending on the idea, it has credibility or not, right? If I'm going to benefit from what I'm trying to convince you to do, then my credibility just tanks, and so people will naturally just go, oh no, I'm not listening to that. But so you've got all these sources, and it's going and the communication system is essentially, well, it's monopolized now into six major um, companies, networks that pretty much control everything from book publishing to magazine publishing. So every it's like I call it an idea syndicate. And so trying to get your news or information from lesser, smaller voices is really hard because of the amplitude of a small voice, just like myself, is really small on the scheme of things. So it goes up to like this high, but vested interests, or the holders of wealth, have money to broadcast in a broad reach, and essentially the success of your idea is going to be related to how much reach you can get. It doesn't, it's I like to say we have the best ideas money can buy. Because the different other opposing ideas, or different things that would be like looking at different root problems, they can't get in there. They can censor it just by blanking them out, and having a bigger megaphone.
bigger megaphone. Well, when you habitually use technology as a memory bank and a logic processor, are we atrophying the personal cognitive muscles required to critically evaluate belief, making us susceptible?
Yeah. Oh, well, I think absolutely. I think a collective mind, right? It's only a recent mind. Like I did most of my research back in late 1800s and 1900s, and so I went to. I mean, if you use AI for that, it's useless, right? Pretty much. And one thing to remember is that whenever technology is comes to a wider adoption, initially it's really neutral and it seems honest, right? So, for example, the Associated Press is a news gathering organization, which is different than a news organization, right? So, and here's the problem: a newspaper, if they have to put reporters in, how many places of the world and pay for them and their housing and all that, it's very expensive. So they said, well, let's just have certain groups do it, and then they can syndicate the material. Well, Kent Cooper said that that was the greatest monopoly on the face of the earth, is to be able to tell one group of citizens how to think about another group, right? And so, but they build themselves as true and unbiased. But he said in his book, in the last chapter, he said, "Truth dot 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 the best propaganda," and he said it's axiomatic that the truer the stream, or the more unbiased the stream, the easier it is to inject taint, right? And so it's very unbiased at the start, and it seems like something you can rely on, but over time, it can get more warped and pulled out of alignment, and without really even people really, because they've got this memory that it was true and unbiased at one point. And that's what I want to say about, like, Google was like that when you had this search engine, and initially it provided really good results, and it didn't preferentially take like the big names. Like now, if you ask it a question, of course AI comes up, but before, let's just say before AI, um, you could get smaller voices in ranking in the top 10, and then more recently it was like just news agencies, official news agencies. And so I can see the same thing happening with AI, because initially we're going to get good answers, and then over time they can sort of just sort of spin it and tune it up to give very, very biased answers that people eventually will not even really recognize what's being done.
So, to wrap up our discussion for today, for individual listening who feels overwhelmed by this, what is the first most practical step they can take to fortify their own personal belief forming process against these systemic vulnerabilities?
Right, that's a great question. I just tell people, and I try to engage people based on history, because there are so many landmines, trigger words, trigger ideas, trigger beliefs, that if you're trying to talk to somebody on the left or right, um, it just blows up in your face. And so, plus, you have to see the context of something over time. When you do, like if you, like my second book is all about the rise of propaganda in America, the use of public opinion manipulation, right? It wasn't called propaganda prior to World War One, and we're supposed to be completely clean of propaganda. But what you find looking historically is this thing has been active in our country for at least 125 years, and manipulating the people to go where basically the holders of wealth wanted them to go. Here's where we want to take you. We'll just manipulate the public mind and get you to want to go there. So when you know the history, um, you started this broadcast with real hope begins when illusion ends. And um, I there was a book about the plane crash in the Andes Mountains, and they were huddled. There were some survivors left, and they were huddled around this radio, and they heard the worst news they could possibly hear was that the search had been called off. But if they hadn't heard those words, they would never have gotten out, because they knew that then, okay, it's up to us. We have to act. And I think, for your listeners, you realize that the illusions of right and left politics, nobody's coming to save us, in my opinion. And so when you go back and you see how long they've been manipulating us, and the types and the patterns that they used over time, it's very easy to say, you know what, that's the worst news ever, but I think she's probably right. And so then we need to then you can start to take 2 steps to help you, because you know the situation as it really is. And that's the first step.
The first step, indeed. And again, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Miss Carl. So can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your books, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
I'm sure that this is, you can see this is the website right in front of you at smartsheep.com with an E. I'm also on Substack. Go ahead and get on the email list there or on the website, and you'll be notified when my second book's coming out. Of course, the first book is out there, and I do have a study guide, and it's something that I really urge parents to sit down. You'll learn a lot, and your kids will learn a lot, but go through this material so they are protected from just a 24/7 onslaught of their phone, trying to make up their mind in a way that you maybe have no influence over.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Michelle Stiles, because if you support her, for sure, more and more empowering advocacy like this will rise. So, Miss Michelle, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Danny.
Welcome, people. See you soon.